He stood at the hospital entrance every morning at 5:45, checking badges with trembling hands that everyone assumed came from age. The young doctors barely glanced at him. Just another old security guard counting down to retirement. Until the morning a renowned surgeon stopped mid-stride, staring at those hands. "My God," he whispered, "you're the one who saved 37 lives in Fallujah." What happened next brought an entire emergency room to tears. Welcome to the Human Stories. Before we begin, tell me, where in the world are you watching from today? And if you believe heroes walk among us unrecognized, hit that subscribe button. These stories matter. The Veterans Memorial Hospital in Denver operated like clockwork. Ambulances arrived, doctors rushed, families waited, and through it all, Thomas Brennan stood at his post by the main entrance. 71 years old, silver hair always perfectly combed, uniform pressed despite the minimum wage that barely covered his rent. He'd been there 6 years, and in all that time, most staff members had never heard him speak more than 10 words in a row. His job was simple: check IDs, sign in visitors, watch for trouble. The nurses called him Tom the Quiet. The residents didn't call him anything at all. To them, he was furniture, part of the building itself, as unremarkable as the beige walls and fluorescent lights. But there was something about his hands. They shook, not constantly, but enough to notice when he held the scanner to check badges. Parkinson's, most assumed. Maybe arthritis. The younger guards sometimes exchanged glances when Tom fumbled with the sign-in sheet, their eyes saying what their mouths wouldn't. How much longer until he retires? That Tuesday morning started like any other. The November cold bit through Tom's jacket as he unlocked the entrance at 5:30 a.m. He set up his station methodically, computer on, visitor log ready, radio charged. By 5:45, he was at his post, back straight despite the arthritis that actually did plague his spine. The first wave of morning shift arrived. Nurses hurrying in with coffee cups, residents looking half dead from overnight calls, administrative staff already on their phones. Tom nodded at each one, scanning badges with those unsteady hands. "Morning, Tom," said Maria, one of the few nurses who acknowledged him. "Morning, ma'am." She'd long stopped trying to get him to call her by her first name. Tom had his ways. At 6:15, a group of surgical residents burst through the door, loud and animated, discussing last night's emergency surgery. One of them, Dr. Bradley Harrison, barely 28 and fresh from Johns Hopkins, was gesticulating wildly about a textbook procedure he'd performed. "Excuse me," Tom said quietly, holding up his hand. "Need to scan your badge, doctor." Bradley rolled his eyes and thrust his ID forward without looking at Tom. "Make it quick, Pops. Got actual lives to save." The other residents snickered. Tom's hand trembled slightly as he raised the scanner. It beeped red. He tried again. Another red beep. "Jesus Christ," Bradley muttered. "Maybe if your hands weren't shaking so much." "Brad, come on," one of his colleagues interjected half-heartedly. "What?" "I'm just saying. They've got him doing security when he can barely hold his scanner steady. What's he going to do if there's actual trouble?" But what Bradley didn't know was about to change everything. Tom tried the scanner once more. This time it worked. "You're clear, doctor." Bradley snatched his badge back. "About time. Maybe consider retiring before you completely lose motor function." The group moved on, their laughter echoing in the lobby. Tom stood quietly, placing the scanner back in its holder. His hands were shaking more now, but not from any disease. Maria, who'd witnessed the exchange from nearby, approached Tom. "Don't listen to him. Bradley's an ass to everyone." "It's all right, ma'am." "It's not all right. You want me to report him?" Tom shook his head. "No need for that." She studied his weathered face, the deep lines around his eyes that spoke of more than just age. "Tom, can I ask you something? Why do you do this job? I mean, you could be retired, relaxing somewhere warm." For a moment, something flickered in Tom's pale blue eyes. "Some of us don't retire, ma'am. We just find different ways to serve." Before Maria could respond, her pager went off. Emergency in or 3. She rushed away, leaving Tom alone again at his post. The morning progressed typically until 9:47 a.m. That's when Dr. Michael Hendricks arrived. He wasn't scheduled to be there. Tuesday was supposed to be his research day. But Hendricks, chief of trauma surgery and a former Navy combat surgeon, had been called in for a consultation. He walked through the entrance with the purposeful stride of someone who'd spent years in operating rooms and battlefield medical tents. At 55, Hendricks still carried himself like the military officer he'd once been. "Morning, sir," Tom said, reaching for his scanner. "Morning." Hendricks handed over his ID, but as Tom took it, the doctor's eyes fell on the security guard's hands. Not the tremor. That wasn't what caught his attention. It was the scars. Thin, precise lines across both palms and fingers. Surgical scars, but old ones. Very old. Hendricks had seen hands like those before. The recognition that crossed his face would soon shake the entire hospital. "Those scars," Hendricks said slowly. "Where did you get them?" Tom's expression didn't change. "Old injury, sir. Nothing important." But Hendricks wasn't looking at Tom's face anymore. He was studying the way the man stood, the subtle favor of his left leg, the particular way he held his shoulders. 25 years of military medicine had taught him to read bodies like others read books. "What's your full name?" Hendricks asked. "Thomas Brennan, sir." "Thomas," Hendricks repeated, his mind racing through memories. "Thomas J. Brennan." Tom's hand stilled completely for the first time that morning. "Just Tom, sir." "My God." Hendricks stepped back, his face pale. "You're him. You're the ghost of Fallujah." The lobby seemed to freeze. Maria, returning from the OR, stopped mid-stride. Two other nurses turned to stare. Even the ambient hospital noise seemed to dim. Tom's voice was barely a whisper. "That's not a name I've heard in a long time, sir." "I was there," Hendricks said, his voice thick with emotion. "I was a junior surgeon at the field hospital. April 2004. The convoy attack. They brought in 37 Marines, all critical. We didn't have enough surgeons. We were going to lose them all." Tom stood perfectly still, his eyes fixed on something beyond the hospital walls, beyond the present moment. Hendricks continued, his voice growing stronger. Then this Navy corpsman appeared out of nowhere. Both his hands were shredded from pulling men out of burning vehicles. He couldn't even hold instruments properly. But he stood in that, or for 18 straight hours, talking the junior medics through procedures, guiding their hands with his voice when his own couldn't work. What happened in that field hospital had become legend, but no one knew the hero had been hiding in plain sight. He saved 37 lives that day, Hendricks said, now addressing the growing crowd of hospital staff. 37 Marines who would have died if not for him. The commanders wanted to give him the Navy Cross, but he disappeared before the ceremony. Nobody knew where he went. They called him the ghost of Fallujah because he vanished like he never existed. Bradley Harrison, who'd been walking past with his coffee, stopped. "Wait, you're talking about Tom? Tom, a security guard?" Hendricks turned on him with an intensity that made the young resident step back. "This man you call Pops, who you mock for his shaking hands. Those hands shake because of nerve damage from pulling wounded Marines out of vehicles that were still on fire. The tremor you laugh at? That's from holding surgical instruments for 18 hours straight with tendons that were barely attached." The coffee cup slipped from Bradley's hand, shattering on the floor. The sound echoed through the now silent lobby. Tom finally spoke, his voice steady. "Dr. Hendricks, please. That was a long time ago." "Not long enough to forget," Hendricks replied. He turned to address the growing crowd. "Do you know why his hands really shake? After Fallujah, he went back out. 3 more tours. Saved over 200 lives in combat zones. The nerve damage got worse with each deployment, but he never stopped. Not until they medically retired him in 2010. Maria's hand covered her mouth. "Tom, why didn't you ever say anything?" "What's to say, ma'am? I did my job then. I do my job now." "Your job?" Bradley's voice cracked. "You're checking badges when you should be." "Should be what?" Tom interrupted gently. "Teaching surgery with hands that can't hold a scalpel? Sitting at home, feeling sorry for myself." He looked at the young resident with unexpected kindness. "Son, I've held hearts in these shaking hands. I've pulled futures out of burning wreckage. Now I make sure everyone who enters this building is supposed to be here. I keep you safe while you save lives. It's all service." The revelation was just beginning to sink in when something extraordinary happened. From the second floor, someone began clapping. Slowly, then another person joined. Within seconds, the entire lobby erupted in applause. Nurses, doctors, administrative staff, all standing, all applauding the quiet man at the security desk. But Tom wasn't looking at them. He was looking at his hands, those scarred, trembling hands that had done so much and asked for so little recognition in return. "DR." Hendricks pulled out his phone. "I'm calling the chief of staff. This is unacceptable." "Please don't," Tom said quickly. "I like my job." "You like, Tom, you're a decorated Navy corpsman working as a security guard. You should be right where I am," Tom finished. "DR. Hendricks, I spent 15 years in combat zones. I've seen enough trauma for 10 lifetimes. Here, I watch people come in broken and leave healed. I see families reunited. I'm part of something good without having to carry the weight of life and death anymore." The crowd had grown larger. Someone was recording on their phone. Word was spreading through the hospital like wildfire. The ghost of Fallujah had been found, and he'd been here all along. Bradley approached slowly, his face flushed with shame. "Mr. Brennan, Tom, I'm so sorry." Tom looked at him with those calm blue eyes. "You didn't know. That's not an excuse. I was cruel." "You were tired," Tom corrected. "I've seen that look before, doctor. The one you had this morning. You lost someone last night, didn't you?" Bradley's eyes widened. "How did you?" 40 years of watching people process death. You learn to recognize it. It's okay to be angry. Just try not to aim it at the wrong targets. The young doctor's eyes filled with tears, but the morning's revelations weren't over yet. DR. Patricia Williams, the chief of staff, arrived in the lobby, having been summoned by multiple urgent texts. She was a formidable woman who ran the hospital with military precision. Fitting, since she was also a veteran. "Tom," she said, approaching him. "Is it true? You're the Fallujah corpsman." "I was a corpsman at Fallujah, ma'am. One of many." "Don't." Her voice was sharp. "Don't diminish what you did. I've read the reports. The real ones, not the sanitized versions. You performed emergency surgery with destroyed hands. You refused evacuation 3 times to keep working. You saved my cousin that day." The lobby fell silent again. "Marcus Williams," she continued. "Lance Corporal, 19 years old. Massive chest trauma. The field report said a corpsman with injured hands talked a junior medic through a procedure that shouldn't have been possible outside of full or. That was you." Tom's composure finally cracked, just slightly. "Marcus, he made it home. He made it home. Has 3 kids now. Coaches Little League." DR. Williams' voice broke. "Because of you." She pulled out her phone and showed Tom a photo. A smiling man in his late 30s with 3 children in baseball uniforms. He doesn't know what happened to the corpsman who saved him. The records were classified, and then you disappeared. "It's better that way," Tom said softly. "No, DR. Williams said firmly. "It's not. Tom, we have a position open. Trauma counselor for our veteran outreach program. The pay is triple what you're making now. Regular hours. Full benefits." "I appreciate that, ma'am, but..." "You'd still be serving," she interrupted. "Still helping people. Just using your experience instead of your hands." Tom was quiet for a long moment. Around him, the hospital staff waited. Finally, he spoke. "Can I still check badges in the morning? Just for an hour or 2. I like seeing everyone come in, starting their day." DR. Williams smiled through her tears. "Tom, you can do whatever you want." But the most powerful moment was still to come. That afternoon, word had spread beyond the hospital. Social media had exploded with the story. Local news stations were calling. But Tom had retreated to the break room, overwhelmed by the attention. Bradley found him there, sitting alone with a cup of coffee. "Mr. Brennan, can I sit?" Tom nodded. "I need to tell you something," Bradley said. "The patient I lost last night, he was a veteran. Afghanistan. I did everything right, followed every procedure, but he still died. I've been replaying it over and over, wondering what I could have done differently." "Sometimes there's nothing different to do," Tom said quietly. "Sometimes death wins despite our best efforts." "How do you live with it? All the ones you couldn't save?" Tom's shaking hands wrapped around his coffee cup. You remember that you tried. You remember that you were there, fighting for them until the end. And you honor them by fighting just as hard for the next one. Bradley was quiet for a moment. Will you teach me? Not medicine. I know you can't do that anymore. But how to carry it. How to be like you. Like me. Tom almost smiled. Son, I'm just a security guard. No, Bradley said firmly. You're the man who shows up every day, despite the pain, despite the shaking, despite everything you've been through. You're the man who treats everyone with dignity, even when they don't deserve it. You're the definition of service. The transformation in the young doctor's perspective would soon spread throughout the entire hospital. Over the next weeks, everything changed. Tom accepted the counseling position, but insisted on keeping his morning security shift. Every day at 5:45 a.m., he was there checking badges, greeting staff. But now they saw him differently. The residents stopped to talk. The nurses brought him coffee. The attending physicians consulted him about their veteran patients. His small office became a sanctuary for staff dealing with trauma, loss, and burnout. One morning, 3 months after the revelation, Tom arrived to find something unusual. The entire emergency department staff was gathered in the lobby. Doctors, nurses, technicians, even the janitorial staff. They were all wearing small pins on their uniforms. 2 hands, scarred but steady, holding a heart. Dr. Williams stepped forward. Tom, we commissioned these. Every trauma staff member wears one now, to remind us that service comes in many forms. That heroes don't always wear capes. Sometimes they wear security uniforms. And that the measure of a person isn't in the steadiness of their hands, but in the strength of their spirit. Tom's eyes filled with tears for the first time in years. Maria spoke up from the crowd. You taught us something, Tom. You taught us that true strength isn't about what you can do. It's about continuing to serve however you can, wherever you're needed. Bradley, now wearing his pin prominently, added, You taught me that respect isn't earned by titles or degrees. It's earned by showing up day after day and doing your part with dignity. The ceremony that followed would become legendary in the hospital's history. Dr. Hendricks had one more surprise. He'd been in contact with the Marines Tom had saved in Fallujah. 37 of them, now scattered across the country, had recorded messages. As the videos played on the lobby's main screen, grown men wept. I named my son Thomas, one said, after the corpsman who gave me the chance to have him. I became a doctor because of you, another shared, to pay forward what you did for me. You saved me twice, a third Marine said, once from dying and once from giving up when I got home. Your words in that field hospital about continuing to serve, just in different ways, they saved my life again. Tom stood surrounded by the hospital staff, his shaking hands held by Maria on one side and Bradley on the other, as message after message played. 37 lives saved, now multiplied into families, careers, and countless acts of service inspired by one man's selfless actions. When the last message ended, Tom spoke, his voice carrying across the silent lobby. I thought I was invisible here, just an old man checking badges. But you all saw me. You saw past the tremors and the scars. You reminded me that service doesn't end when a uniform comes off. It just changes shape. He looked at Bradley. Doctor, you asked how I live with the ones I couldn't save. This is how. By being part of something that saves others. By watching you all do what I no longer can. By knowing that every person who walks through these doors gets the chance at healing. The impact of Tom's story would ripple far beyond the hospital walls. The media attention that followed was overwhelming, but Tom handled it with characteristic grace. He agreed to one interview, using it to highlight the thousands of veterans working quiet jobs, serving without recognition. Within weeks, a national initiative started, Hidden Heroes, identifying and honoring veterans in civilian service roles. The Veterans Memorial Hospital created the Thomas J. Brennan Award, given annually to staff members who exemplified service beyond their job description. Bradley was the first recipient, having started a program pairing young doctors with veteran mentors. But the most significant change was in Tom himself. The tremor in his hands remained, but he no longer tried to hide it. He wore his scars openly, his story no longer a secret, but a beacon for others struggling with visible and invisible wounds. One evening, 6 months after that transformative morning, Tom was preparing to leave when he found Bradley waiting by the entrance. "Walking you to your car has become a tradition," the young doctor said. "Half the surgical staff fights over who gets to do it." As they walked, Bradley asked, "Do you ever regret it? All those years of staying quiet?" Tom considered the question. "I wasn't staying quiet, son. I was listening, watching, learning who people really are when they don't think anyone important is looking. It taught me more about humanity than any medal or recognition ever could." "And what did you learn?" "That most people are good. They just need the chance to show it. You prove that. You went from mocking an old man to becoming one of the finest doctors I know. Not because your surgical skills improved, but because your heart did." The lessons Tom taught would transform a generation of healthcare workers. A year later, at the hospital's annual gala, Tom was the guest of honor. He sat at the head table, uncomfortable in his formal suit, his hands shaking as he tried to cut his steak. Without a word, Bradley, sitting beside him, quietly switched plates, having already cut Tom's food into manageable pieces. Dr. Williams stood to speak. "Tonight, we honor not just a hero from the battlefield, but a man who taught us that heroism is a daily choice. Tom Brennan showed us that service has no expiration date, that dignity isn't dependent on ability, and that the quietest among us often carry the loudest stories." She paused, looking directly at Tom. "But most importantly, he taught us to really see the people around us. The security guard, the janitor, the parking attendant. Every person has a story, a value, a contribution that goes beyond their job title." The room erupted in applause, but Tom's attention was elsewhere. He was watching the entrance, where a new security guard stood, checking invitations. A young woman, recent Army veteran, working through her own trauma. Tom had trained her himself, teaching her not just security protocols, but the art of patient observation, of finding purpose in seemingly small acts of service. She caught his eye and nodded, a small gesture that said everything. The torch had been passed. As the evening continued, Tom found himself surrounded by the lives he'd touched. Not just the Marines from Fallujah, several of whom had flown in for the event, but the hospital staff who'd learned from his example. Bradley, who now ran a trauma support group for medical staff. Maria, who'd started a program ensuring every veteran patient had an advocate. Dozens of others who'd been changed by the simple presence of a quiet man doing his job with dignity. The evening would end with one final, unexpected revelation. Dr. Hendricks took the microphone for the final speech of the night. "There's something Tom doesn't know. Something we've been working on for months." Tom looked up, confused. "The Navy has been petitioned to reconsider your decorations from Fallujah. The review board met last week." Hendricks pulled out an official envelope. "Thomas J. Brennan, by order of the Secretary of the Navy, you are hereby awarded the Navy Cross for extraordinary heroism in combat medical operations." The room went silent, then exploded in thunderous applause. Tom sat frozen, his shaking hands unable to open the envelope. Bradley opened it for him, pulling out the medal that should have been awarded 17 years earlier. But Tom wasn't looking at the medal. He was looking at his hands, those scarred, trembling hands that had saved so many, that had been mocked and then celebrated, that continued to serve even when they could no longer hold a scalpel. "I don't need this," he said quietly, though tears streamed down his face. "I already have my reward. It walks through those hospital doors every morning. It saves lives in operating rooms I'll never enter again. It's in every person here who chooses service over self." He stood slowly, Bradley steadying him. "But I'll accept it. Not for me, but for every veteran working security, driving buses, cleaning buildings, all of us who found different ways to continue serving. This is for them." The story that began with mockery had transformed into something far greater. The next morning, Tom was at his post at 5:45 a.m., same as always. The Navy Cross was at home in a drawer. He'd said medals were for ceremonies, not for daily wear. He checked badges, greeted staff, and maintained his watch. But something was different. Every person who passed through those doors saw him now. Really saw him. Not just a security guard, but a guardian. Not just an old man with shaking hands, but a testament to the power of quiet service. Bradley arrived at 6:15, as he did every morning now, bringing Tom coffee and sitting with him for a few minutes before his shift. You know, Bradley said, "I've been thinking about what you said, about service changing shape but never ending. Yeah, I want to do what you do. Not now. I've got years of surgery ahead of me. But someday, when my hands aren't steady enough anymore, I want to find my own way to keep serving." Tom smiled, a real smile that transformed his weathered face. "You already are, son. Every patient you treat with dignity, every colleague you support, every moment you choose compassion over efficiency, that's service." As the morning sun climbed higher, casting long shadows through the hospital lobby, Tom stood at his post. His hands shook, but his purpose was steady. Around him, the hospital buzzed with life, with healing, with hope, with the constant rhythm of people caring for people. He thought about the 37 Marines, alive because of those 18 hours in Fallujah. He thought about the countless lives they'd gone on to touch. He thought about Bradley and the other young doctors learning that medicine was about more than procedures. He thought about all the invisible heroes working thankless jobs with dedication and grace. The ripple effects of one-man service would continue for generations. 3 years later, when Tom finally did retire, at 74, only because his legs could no longer support the standing, the hospital held a ceremony. Over 300 people attended. Not dignitaries or officials, but the people whose lives he'd touched. The nurse who'd been inspired to go back for her MD. The janitor who Tom had helped through PTSD. The young residents who'd learned that respect was earned through consistent kindness, not titles. Bradley, now an attending surgeon, spoke at the ceremony. Tom Brennan taught me that heroes don't always save the day in dramatic fashion. Sometimes they just show up day after day and do their job with quiet dignity. He taught me that shaking hands can still steady hearts, that invisible service is still service, that every person deserves to be seen. The hospital unveiled a plaque by the entrance where Tom had stood for 9 years. It didn't mention his military service or his medals. It simply read, "Thomas J. Brennan stood here. He saw everyone. He protected everyone. He taught us that service has no expiration date." But the real legacy wasn't in the plaque. It was in the security guard who now stood at that post, trained by Tom to observe with compassion. It was in Bradley's patient interactions, forever changed by an old man's wisdom. It was in the 100 small kindnesses that rippled out from one man's example. Tom lived another 8 years, spending them mentoring veterans, visiting the hospital regularly, and watching as his story inspired a national movement to recognize the hidden heroes among us. When he passed peacefully at 82, his funeral filled the cathedral. Marines from Fallujah served as pallbearers. Hospital staff formed an honor guard. But the most touching tribute came from a young security guard at another hospital across the country, who posted simply, "I never met Tom Brennan, but his story made me proud of my job. I check badges. I watch doors. I serve. Thank you, Tom, for showing us that every job has dignity when done with purpose." The story ends where it began, but with transformed perspective. Today, if you walk into Veterans Memorial Hospital in Denver, you'll see a security guard at the entrance. They check badges, sign in visitors, watch for trouble. It seems like a simple job, but look closer. Look at how they greet each person. Look at the respect they show to everyone, from the chief surgeon to the night janitor. Look at the small pin they wear, 2 scarred hands holding a heart. They carry on Tom Brennan's legacy, proving every day that heroes don't always wear capes or uniforms or surgical scrubs. Sometimes they wear security badges and stand watch, ensuring that everyone who enters gets the chance to heal, to serve, to be seen. Because Tom taught them, taught all of us, that the measure of a person isn't in the steadiness of their hands or the impressiveness of their title. It's in showing up day after day and serving however you can, wherever you're needed, for as long as you're able. His hands shook, but his purpose never wavered. He was mocked, then celebrated, but through it all, he remained the same. A quiet man at his post, watching over others, proving that true strength isn't about what you can do. It's about continuing to serve when everyone thinks you have nothing left to give. Have you ever met someone like Tom? Someone whose quiet service went unnoticed until the truth came out? Share their story in the comments. Let's honor the hidden heroes among us. Subscribe to the Human Stories. Every week, we share tales of unsung heroes and moments of unexpected dignity. Because everyone has a story worth telling. And remember, the next time you pass by someone in a service role, security, cleaning, maintenance, take a moment to really see them. You might be standing next to a hero.